So, now on to our keynote speaker, and to my personal hero, my brother, Dr. Thomas Golden. I know Tom is already wondering why I had to thank everyone else while it was his time to speak. Tom, thank you very much for letting me cut into your time. Tom, for anyone who has had the good fortune to spend any time with him, is clearly the most engaging person I have ever known. His ability to participate immediately in any conversation without even knowing the subject is absolutely incredible. And you folks coming from overseas, from different countries, will also know that he doesn't even need to speak the language to be able to relate to every one of you. It's why before Paul Schultz became our international sales manager, Tom was in that role, and creating fast and permanent friends wherever he went. I've always enjoyed being able to ride my brother's wake, and delighted to invite him up now to share his presentation with you this evening, sharing a bit of the history of why we're all here together today, celebrating this gathering. So, Tom Golden.
Thanks, Dave.
The last comment that Mark made to me was, the right clicker goes right and the left clicker goes left. As much as I'm not used to speaking in front of public, which is very rare, I too want to, at the onset, make a comment about all of your role in relationship to Golden Artist Colors, and obviously to the legacy generated by Sam and Adele Golden, our mother and father. You may not realize it because you do what you do on a daily basis. You're painters, you're calligraphers, you're sculptors, you're painters, calligraphers, and sculptors. You're doing workshops, you sell shoes on the side, you do whatever it is you have to do to make a living. But we are absolutely devoted to and allegiant to all of you for carrying forward your response, not just to a product, to titanium white or to alizarin crimson, which isn't so permanent anyway, or to all the things that you've appreciated about Golden Artist's creativity, and but particularly to the philosophy of the company of Golden Artist Colors, which generated by Sam and Adele Golden, but not nearly with the power, the commitment, the fervor, the vigor, the smarts that Mark Golden has brought to Golden Artist Colors. Mark is typically, he is unusual in an industry that is primarily dedicated to making monies, okay? Not that we're not interested in making a buck, okay? But Mark Golden, okay, and obviously supported by a mainstay for him, Barbara Golden. Has led this company from the day my folks started in their kitchen in a farmhouse in New Berlin, has led this company combating the forces of Adele Golden, which is like, typhoons have nothing in common with Adele Golden, but managed to hold a course and a philosophy and a mission that he's held to with absolute vigor. And I don't think any of us could appreciate the talent of a young man, 16 years my junior, who has brought you all here together. All of us are in large part dedicated to and committed to the energy level of Mark. Now, let's not talk about Mark any longer. I'd like to talk about me. Enough about Mark. Okay. So sometime, he said, look, I'm only going to take 8 minutes of your time. I don't care. 8:30 is supposed to be. If it goes to 8:35, you'll manage to hold in place. The dessert's being served. Okay. Years ago, when I was still performing at this particular point, you would have heard, ladies and gentlemen, the next course is served, ladies. And they take your dish away even if you weren't finished. because dessertless time at Grossinger's to be served. Sometime in 1938, at least 9 months before July 6, 1938, Sam and Adele Golden did whatever they did and gave birth to me a long time ago. But clearly they were involved with one another long before that. And here goes, folks. That's Adele, obviously, and that's Sam, and obviously this Fakakta clicker is doing nothing. I just said to Todd, if the yellow-green light isn't on, does it do anything? Okay, there we go, Mark knows. That's what I meant about Mark as opposed to his brother. So anyway, this is a piece about Sammy Golden. May 20th, 1914, graduated in 1932, mid-year graduation in Thomas Jefferson High School in Brooklyn, New York. They both were raised in Brooklyn, New York. He on Essex Street in Brooklyn, right near the elevated Pitkin Avenue trains. And my mother, Ida Adele Golden, a sweetie, was raised on Ashford Street, not too far away. So anyway, it describes a little bit about Adele. It gives you some background. She was in effect, what would be a paralegal in nowadays terms in legal firm. Bright, very attractive. I mean, particularly attractive. Well, so was he. They were both good looking. Anyway. But it turns out, at least in terms of storytelling, the Meltz family, Ida Adele Meltz, was not particularly thrilled with Sammy Golden from Essex Street. Not that he was like a wise guy or a delinquent, just whatever he was. Anyway, they obviously married sometime in the early 1930s. I don't know, when did it say they married? It says they married at some point. I know they got married. At least what they're doing. You don't know as a newborn whether your parents are married, and you couldn't care less. So 1938 was the day of my birth, and little do you know, obviously, when you're born, that you're born to parents who you don't know their history for sure, and you certainly can't predict their future. We lived in Essex Street in Brooklyn, New York, at the home of my grandparents, Abe and Becky Golden. They had a 4-family building, and we lived on the upstairs floor. And at that point in time, when I was quite young, my dad worked for a period of time with who became his mentor, a special person in his world, our world, the Golden family's world, gentleman, an uncle for my dad, Leonard Beaucourt. Leonard Beaucourt was then and became even more so a renowned figure in the artist material trade, but not just that, in the world of artists, in the New York world of painters, and Leonard Beaucourt became the mentor for my dad, who went to work for him in the late 1930s. Went to work for his uncle in the paint plant. My dad, Sam Golden, I don't think had any idea what oil paint was as against salted butter. Well, just a bit about salted butter. It turns out when they first got married, since you asked about salted butter, and this has to do with Sam and Adele Golden, the entrepreneur. Oh, yeah, thanks, Mark. There are photos that accompany this talk, but not necessarily in the order they're supposed to be. So anyway, when they first got married, they decided to open up a dairy store. And in Brooklyn, a dairy store at that point was truly dairy. Pot cheese, farmer cheese, butter, lox, salmon. There was no meat. Anyway, they opened up a dairy store, Sam and Adele Golden, their first financial venture. And it burned to the ground in the first year. Okay, that was the story. No insurance in those days, so whatever funds these two young people put together went up in smoke. And then Sam had the opportunity to work with his Uncle Leonard in his artist paint factory. Leonard Beaucourt started earlier on. You'll hear much more about it tomorrow, I'm sure, tomorrow. But anyway, Leonard Beaucourt, his uncle, only a few years older, maybe 4 or 5 years older. He's a young uncle. Leonard Beaucourt had been making hand-ground oil paints with a fellow named Irwin Lefcourt. I'll just take an aside, that's all. Beaucourt has this very, very Française kind of cosmopolitan and European quality to it. But it was Lenny Bogdanoff. Bogdanoff isn't particularly fancy. And Irwin Lefcourt, who his partner was, isn't particularly fancy. But both of these guys met 2 school teachers in the early 30s. Ruth and Sarah, both school teachers. They became enamored of each guy. They ended up making love to them, whatever they did with one another. They both married one another. And they're both women who were smart school teachers. These guys are unemployed, talented artists, young artists, not particularly particularly skillful, but obviously identified themselves as artists. The women said, why don't you fellows start making paint? And they did. And they developed and joined one another and had a company called Beaucourt. So Beaucourt, c'est très français, Beaucourt. But it has nothing to do with the Jewish background of both of them. But Erwin Lefcour, C-O-U-R, and Leonard Bogdanoff, B-O. They put the B-O with the C-O-U-R, and there comes Beaucourt. Beaucourt became quite a name in the fine artist world as time went by in hand-ground oil paints. Mark? Oh, there we are. Interesting enough, when Dad went to work with Leonard Beaucourt. This is a shot of, I think it's Leonard's arms. I don't know if we have any of Dad, but anyway, hand-ground oil paints done with the best pigments possible, an excellent line of oil paint companies they made, and that's filling tubes. And just a brief aside about the tube filling. When I was in high school, I guess, and I don't know if I was at Cornell at the time, but anyway, in high school, I had occasion to work in the factory. And one of the jobs I had, aside from, I hate to tell you, actually milling paint on the mill, like really like a paint maker, was to fill tubes, lead tubes. One day I was filling tubes, so you have the tubes on a glass tray that you've mashed up with oils and acrylic, and pigment. And you take a spatula and you make a line with it, and then take the lead tube and just drop it along the head of the lead tube and tap the tube and it goes in, and tap the tube and it goes in. And anyway, at some point there's a pressure that bangs a clamp, and you bang a clamp and you fold it again, you fold it again. And I was ready to put the label on, and my Uncle Leonard, it's his Uncle Leonard, but we refer to him as Uncle Leonard anyway, he came by and he said, "This isn't a push cart, Tommy. It's not a push cart." Who the fuck? I didn't know what he was talking about. It's not a push cart. And he showed me how to put the label on exactly right, so the label hit the neck of the tube. It's just a silly comment to make a little kid. I felt so embarrassed. Why? Because Leonard Beaucourt occupied a unique place in our family's life. He knew the theater in New York, he knew the museums, he was just this side of Jesus. He was someone special, a big mane of white hair, tall, big nose, just gallant. He had nothing to do with the rest of the Goldens. They were all, in effect, sort of plebeian and peasants and bourgeois compared to Leonard. So whenever Leonard visited us at our home in East New York, and he would come to our house, my mom would make a meal. She was a particularly good cook. She made like 5 dishes well, like eggs and eggs and eggs and eggs. No, she'd have a special meal, and Uncle Leonard was coming, and this is a guy from Manhattan. So Manhattan to East New York and Brooklyn could have been from Shangri-La to wherever. And he was grand, and his anecdotes were grand. We knew nothing about theater. What's theater? We knew the Kinema movie house that had movies down the block. Anyway, obviously, before the war, Dad went to work with Sam, and there's a photo there of Sam with his pipe on, always attractive. That was one of the things, I guess, that caught this little Tati Adele. And I think, Mark, I think the other fellow is Erwin. I think it's Erwin Lefcourt, the fellow just to this side of my dad. Lenny Beaucourt with a cigarette. Shmoka Bernstein with a cigarette there, and Harry Schultz, whatever their names are. Smoking was big in those days. Anyway, this is in a studio on 15th Street. But reflective of, and it continues to this day, the involvement of paint making and artists and paint making and artists, paint and artists and paint makers and artists. And that clearly is something that you've, I'm sure, come to appreciate working with Golden Artist Colors, Patty and the rest of that absolute symbiotic relationship that no other company, certainly not in the milk business, no other company in the paint business has that kind of intimate, ongoing, historical relationship with paint makers. And there's an example. Now this photo here is particularly interesting in that there's a little bit of nakedness in it, and so that makes it a little bit more appealing. On 15th Street, one of the events that would occur on a regular basis when they weren't shooting crap and cleaning off and eating corned beef sandwiches, artists would come to this one studio large enough to actually be making paint. You see the mortar here on the glass top table. Leonard and Sam would be making paint, and at the same time, artists, this is WPA days. This is before they're in the Second World War. And in this particular case here, they have a model who is modeling for them. For those of you who are a little bit embarrassed, you can turn to the left, but there's only one shot. So for years we were concerned and interested, well, Mark particularly because he's into naked bodies and everything. Who is the woman? Who is this woman there? And I've forgotten exactly how, I think through Erwin Lefcourt before he died, and his wife, Sarah, We came to find out that the woman was, here goes folks, her name is Lillian Bassman, who became, not as a model to make a buck, became the #1 fashion photographer, female fashion photographer in the United States of America. For Harper's Magazine and Vogue, that was Lillian Bassman. She died at 92 in 2012. We never had occasion to contact her, or we knew where she lived. We just sorrowfully never made the contact to just reflect on this particular scene of artist Leonard, Sam, that's Sam up there on the far left of it, once again reflecting the intimacy, the involvement, the concern. Nothing to do, if you will, with making a buck, because they're all just sort of making a go of it. Paint to painters, paint. My guess is they hardly sold any paintings, as is the case with most of you too. Okay. Well, no, that's probably not the case. Doesn't matter. You paint, no matter you sell or don't sell. That's one of the great things about painters. All of you are creative. Is that the rest of them are blessed that you can't do anything else or won't do anything else. You could do other things. You just do it all the time. You paint, you paint, you paint, you sell, who cares? You still paint, and the rest of us are blessed with the consequences of that. It truly is a unique relationship that artists just generate art and almost can't stop. Well, that's how it goes. What can I tell you? So that was back to starting with Leonard. World War II came along, and my dad, who was scared, like other people, whatever. I don't know what got him out of the war, maybe because he had a kid or two, or us. And he worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard at that period of time. And he worked there throughout the war, had some difficult times. I won't describe the events, but some discriminative behavior towards Sammy Golden with some other workers. They worked on these victory ships, which they put out every 2 days. Lots of them sunk after they hit the water, but we put out ships up the kazoo. And Dad, in order to get a job, and this is reflective of his creativity, his uniqueness of a dad, I never knew he had anything like, because Sammy was just sort of Sammy who played the horses at the local barbershop. He learned how to use an adze, A-D-Z. It looks like a pick on one side, and the other side is like a flat, like a chisel. And you bang into wood and it cuts out chips, whatever. But in order to get a job, he had to learn how to use the tool. So he learned how to use this tool. I don't know if you know, we had it for many, many years, the adze, right, in the garage. I guess he knew how to use it, but it allowed him to get a job in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And then just one anecdote about that. At times, timber would fall off of these victory ships and float into the water of Sheepshead Bay. And you got the assignment at times in a rowboat to gather these timbers, tie them to your rowboat, and bring them back to shore. On this particular day, Sammy Golden is in the row. He's not from the seamen, and the tide is going out as opposed to in, and he's in a rowboat. So he got several miles outside of Sheepshead Bay with this, trying to bring these timbers in. Obviously, he got back in time to see his wife again. Subsequent to the war, he had the opportunity, Sam did, to join with his brothers, Irving and Ben Golden. They had started a milk delivery, a milk producing company out in Long Island, Amityville, Long Island. Roland's Dairy was the name of it, for those of you who may know it. Actually, at the onset, they had cows. I don't think they milked them, they just had cows hanging out, so it looked like a milk plant, but they distributed milk. They asked Sam to join them, and he said he felt obliged and committed to his Uncle Leonard to go back with Leonard Beaucourt. So subsequent to the World War II, Dad went back with Leonard and continued working with him. 1947 marks a very, very important materials development in the world of paint materials. And at that time, Magna was developed in 1947. Obviously, it wasn't waterborne, turpentine. Was it Terps? What was the vehicle? How did you get it off your hands, Mark? How did you get it off your hands? It couldn't take water. Mineral spirits. Okay, fine, big deal. But just an aside, when Dad got the material, the clear Magna material, one of the first places he put it was on the chrome of our Packard cards, like to cover the chrome, so it wouldn't be destroyed. And we also had our house painted in Hillsdale with Magna cobalt blue. I'm sure there was a rule in the town you couldn't paint a house trim in cobalt blue, but we did anyway, or we did. So he went to work with Dad at that particular time. Then sometime, I think it was in the early 50s. In the early 50s, a fellow, I remember one of the partners, Art Siegel, had an item they presented at the New York Toy Show on 14th Street. Every year they have a toy show and people present their items. You may be familiar with it. Anyway, this fellow Art Siegel I don't remember, why do I remember Art Siegel's name? Because it was sort of, Art Siegel's like a Jewish boy from Brooklyn. Anyway, he presents his toy with his partner. They presented. They went away on a vacation for a couple of weeks. They came back, and their little plant in Long Island City had canvas bags full of orders for this product. Okay, only one person, not you, Barbara, one person can guess. There was the hula hoop, and there's the pet rock. But in the 1950s, what was a myth? Now you all can smell it, you can feel it, you used it. What was it?
Paint by number.
Paint. All right, Patty. Patty is big on winning contests. She presses buttons. She loves to make. The paint by number set came alive, and at that particular point, these fellows needed a company to produce the paint by the gallons, by the hundreds of gallons, by the thousands of gallons into small, tiny cups. Sam Golden, once again, not a chemist, not into that whole world, other than a creative guy from Brooklyn. A creative guy with Magna. And then he generated, the base was castor oil. I asked Mark, why was it castor oil, Mark? It's good to get your caca done and all that stuff. He said it was castor oil. It wouldn't dry these little cups because they had like a millimeter of paint in it, and it kept it wet. Well, they became a major manufacturer of the paint for the paint by number set. The particular paint by number set was called Art Award. Art Award, and there is Lassie. Mark was showing me the number of different painting sets they came out with hundreds of different, some really, and some even modern abstract paintings that these guys put together. And not only did he make the paint, but Sam Golden got together with Mr. Hensler, H-E-N-S-L-E, you don't have to remember the name, it's not in Google. Mr. Hensler lived in Old Japan, and he was a Swedish machinist. He had a machine in his barn. Dad found out about him, however he found out about him. He went together with Mr. Hensler, and he made, at his design and Mr. Hensler, a machine that would fill 144 little these Totsie cups with paint, right? Pressed the plastic cover on it so it smashed into the covers, and then another cutting bar came down through and cut up 144 cups that fell into a container, and on 67,000 cups, 24/7. Bocor became a 24/7 company on the back of the paint by numbers. Not only that, but they realized, because OSHA wasn't big, but Sam was big, they used to have one handle you pressed, and that pressed down the cutting blade, until they found out that people were possibly losing their fingers, so they put two handles, okay, to make the cutting blade sound. But Dad was responsible for, Mark, the actual design of that filling machine and the cutting machine. Now, this a little predates this photo, because all of these photo print was done by Mark, and the timing was totally off. When we moved into Hillsdale from Brooklyn, New York in 1951, I had just had my bar mitzvah at Rappaport's Dairy Restaurant that July. It was just straight dairy, and my cousins, Sheppy and Sonny and Terry, played the band, and they played the Tikva and all that crap. We moved that summer to Hillsdale, and the branches you see were an apple tree. And we're coming from East New York, where houses are shoulder to shoulder. The Pitkin Avenue train was 50 feet from the house. The streets had dead cats on it every single evening. The garbage was picked up. To move to Hillsdale was like Shangri-La. And this photo here of Mom, myself, that guy on the right here, the tots, Daddy, Joanne, and my brother Stephen, who's just below me, you realize the only person who's not there is your man, old Marky Babes. When I was 16, that is 5 years later, somehow Sam and Adele managed to do the thing, and there came Mark. But he's not there. I only put this photo in because there was one more commentary about Sam Golden and his creativity and his engineering and his whatever. That's my brother Stephen at about, what do you think, Mark, maybe 10. In Hillsdale, every year they had this Hillsdale, go-kart race down a hill in Hillsdale, New Jersey. My father said, we're going to win this. No way. And he put together this cart, and he said, we're going to put this 50-gallon tank on it, fill it with water, and you'll go like 1,000 miles down the hill, right? So it was absolutely great. This was so painfully pitiful for my brother Stephen, who was a sweetie. He had his helmet on. He was so excited, because we were going to win, for sure. The guy says, go. And we push Stephen. Watch me. I'm in the car. Watch me. Hits the curb on the left, hits the curb on the right, backs up, Stephen. what the physics of my hotshot daddy didn't realize. Unless you fill this container all the way to the very top, there was air, and the water slushed around. Stephen never made it 10 feet past the starting point. No, he got about 10 feet past. I mean, at some point, just the hill itself, the hill would take a dead body down this hill, let alone Stephen. It was so painful. It was so, you know, all of us have experiences in life. Unless you're there, you don't realize the poignancy of it. And he was so excited. And he you know, to go from curb to curb where these other little hot shits are running down in front of you all. Anyway, that was a piece of our life in Hillsdale, New Jersey. One more comment about, this has to do with Sam's creativity. Still, you know, he's at Beaucourt producing all the time. His father, Abe Golden, that's my grandfather, his dad, had sold linoleum in the 10s, 15s, 20s when he came from, wherever they came from, Bialystok, someplace in Russia. My mother came from cleaner stock. She's straight Lithuanian. My father's stock is sort of like stock, whatever. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but anyway. So it turns out that my dad learned from his father, who had a linoleum store, how to lay linoleum. And he would do odd jobs, even when he was working with Beaucourt. And on a particular day, he got a call from a fellow to go to his apartment on Gramercy Park and lay linoleum in his apartment. And my dad said, okay. And we went to his apartment. And we laid the linoleum. I still have his linoleum knife. Well, you'll get it, Mark. Anyway, it's this particular knife to cut linoleum. We laid it, and in the kitchen, in this apartment, on Gramercy Park, a lovely apartment, was a note. A note above a Pyrex dish said, Sam, please turn this steak over to marinate, okay? Signed, Elliot. Elliot was the name of, those of you who have to be old enough, Elliot Ellishoffen was one of the major Life magazine photographers at that period of time. Like according to him and his publicist, literally quoted, the greatest living American photographer. Well, it turns out he was very renowned. And it's just an aside, not so much, if you go to Wikipedia, Elliot Ellis, it'll say painter, photographer, chef. So we had this steak we wanted marinated in soy sauce. Who the hell knows what it was? My dad turned it over a few times and we left. The reason I raised the anecdote was not so much about Elliot Ellishoffen, so it may be interesting in a way, and marinated beef, is Sam Golden, unbeknownst to the rest of us, okay, was this mild-mannered, you know, well-built, like guy who you consider just a schlepper. Like, what did he know how to do? But he knew how to do a lot of things. Extremely creative, interested, curious. And he had a phrase that followed him all the way through Golden Artist Colors, and beyond, well, beyond that, and not beyond, but to this day. Don't tell me it can't be done, let me do it, get out of my way. Or don't tell me it can't be done, get out of my way, let me do it. Which was fine with Adele, because she frequently said to him, look, go in the barn and make some paint, get out of my face, okay? Because this is not particularly pleasant, Sam. Anyway, that's why I introduced that particular anecdote. Well, anyway, back into Golden Artist Colors, or to Beaucourt, when Dad went back there in the 40s, stayed with it obviously for many, many years. Sam and Leonard Beaucourt were uncle and nephew, but literally much more brothers in terms of their involvement with one another, their bonding to one another, their commitment to one another. Dad was the paint maker, Dad was in the factory, Dad got schmutzed up, Leonard was in the office, Leonard Beaucourt was the letter writer, a raconteur. There's no one in the paint world, certainly in the New York art world, that did not know, admired, wanted to meet Leonard Beaucourt, anyone and everyone you can possibly name at that time. By the way, that Anyway, we're in Hillsdale. Clearly the folks must have been a little bit strapped, although the paint by numbers took us out of Brooklyn to Hillsdale to a regular house. He doesn't remember when my sister and my brother, Stephen, and I was a little more sophisticated, I was 12, they ran up and down the stairs because we had our own stairs in the house. We had a second floor that was ours as opposed to an apartment. Ran up and down the stairs, right around because it's our stairs, and a fireplace besides. But anyway, my folks, this is the entrepreneurial side, worked in Hillsdale at Frankie's Market in Lodi, New Jersey on weekends, selling brassieres, panties, women's garments, off a stand, a wooden stand at night, selling on weekends. I don't know how many weekends they did it, how many months they did it, but they did it. Sam and Adele Golden at Frankie's Market, Sam and Adele Golden, the hotshot Magna maker, the hotshot, da-da-da-da-da-da. I remember vividly, I don't know if I mentioned it, I mentioned to Joanne today, my sister Joanne lives up in Lake Worth. I remember Mom putting paper in her boots in the wintertime, sort of insulation. I think to myself, they couldn't afford fur in their boots. What the hell, were they so strapped? Anyway, they were always interested in sort of marketing. Didn't she sell, I didn't put this in, didn't she sell antiques out of the barn at some point? Yeah, when they moved up to the farm, Mom would buy antiques at an auction, like $5 for a piece of furniture and sell it for $5 because she wasn't such a hotshot business person. No, so they always had sort of a mindset in the commercial world, in the world of commerce, both of them, and both supportive of it. Anyway, Dad was also a bowler. That's right, he was a bowler. Who cares? I don't know what he scored, but he was a bowler and he liked to bowl, and Mom loved to knit. She was a major knitterer, like knit one, purl two, knit one. And as a kid, I frequently found myself with my hands up in the air in Brooklyn and also in Hillsdale when we were young. Hands up in the air, and she'd take a bolt of work. Those of you who knit know, you got to go round. And my hand, no, we finished, Mom. I got some homework. Who gives a shit? You just keep your hands up there, whatever. Okay. But she was a great knitter, a major knitter, great woolen and stuff maker. Well, anyway, there is Sam. Oh, there he is, little Marky babes. Dad loved to fish, and there's a fishing trip, I guess maybe out of Sheepshead Bay, something like that. It obviously was in Florida. We didn't even know Florida existed at the time. But there, Sam loved to fish, and he loved to also see in his right hand, what's there? Ulysses, what's there? Cigars. Sam Golden was known to have a cigar, lit, unlit, dead, rotted, killed, whatever. They had long since stopped smoking. Or I didn't have this, but just an aside. None of you are perhaps old enough, but during the war was a time when women started to smoke. Like, smoke is a statement about, like, I'm an American, I'm a woman, and I can smoke. They didn't do drugs, but they smoked. And when I come home from school, out in front of our apartment building was a stoop, like the stoop, and each of the women would have their own ashtray. They'd put down on the stoop. My mom would have her ashtray, and she'd puff it away on the old Golds or Chester, whatever the brands, and they didn't have Marlboro. People just smoked straight cigarettes, like coughing the shit out of themselves. So my dad stayed at that's a picture, it's a nondescript picture, it's just a picture to have on. Now here's Sam working with Lenny Bocour. As I said, Sam was on the floor. And just an aside, Lenny Bocour, certainly on 42nd Street, where the plant was between 9th and 10th Avenue, they moved from 15th Street, where that first naked photo was. They moved to a larger quarters on 42nd Street, 52nd Street between 10th and 9th and 10th. Sam was the paint maker. Leonard would be in his office. But then, obviously, he's still an owner. He would come downstairs to the plant. Whatever yentering was going on, whatever bullshit, whatever wasted time, people were smoking, whatever, everyone all of a sudden was totally involved in their task. When Uncle Leonard would come down, it was like the warden of the prison came down. Not that he was mean-spirited, except watch how you're labeling the tubes, don't want a pushcart. But clearly this relationship had this clear-cut demarcation. Leonard Bocour was, in effect, the spiritual, the philosophy of the company, and Sammy made them money. What can I tell you? Sammy made it work. Sammy developed stuff. People used to ask me when I talk about the company, not only when Mark and Barbara, they took it over and made it grander and better than what it ever was. He said, Dad, a chemist. He couldn't make a fried egg. He'd tell his wife, give me the orange juice. It was 2 feet in front of his face. He was just a sweetie, a good old boy who clearly had, without his realizing it, a creative sense, a curiosity sense, a willing to try. Just like a character trait. And he ends up in an industry totally unrelated to his background, other than, Leonard was in it, and became, obviously, and then Aquatech come about in, Mark, what was the year of Aquatech? I forgot to put the date down. What? 61. Aquatech. Well, we know there's a little precursor. We're not going to talk about the precursor. But anyway, Aquatech in 1961. And the story of the products goes on and on and on and on. I just wanted to tell you a couple of anecdotes about my time working in Golden Artist Colors as a high school and then as a college student during my summertime from Cornell. I'd work in the factory doing whatever they assign and making paint. There's all formulas, put this much and this much in zero, this much pigment, put it in there, mix it around, hope it comes out right, whatever. But one of the interesting parts, which I think has affected me later on in my life when I realized I had cancer a couple of times, at the end of the day, At the end of the day, after you cleaned up the machines, these are oil paints. And the only solvent that really worked was benzene. Benzene. We had 50-gallon drums of benzene. So you take the benzene with rags and you clean off the roller mills, you clean off the mixers, you clean off your spatulas, you clean off the knives. The knife on the roller mill was like 3-foot razor blade sharp. Don't touch the blade, Golden, don't touch it, okay? So they would do it for me. Then it came time to clean up. At the end of the day, they would empty all of the dirty benzene out into a big fireproof can, and they put fresh benzene in. Fresh benzene, like glacial water, like you have in your room. I saw this thing, they said, they ordered this water from glaciers, and it's disgusting. We can't get glacier from Fort Lauderdale. They put fresh benzene in that same pot, but it was clear. And then you went, this is the truth, folks, because if you've ever worked with oil paint, it doesn't matter how neat you are. It's up your nose, in your groin, on your pants, in your ears. And you take the rag, you put it in the benzene, and you are so grateful, wiping up your nose, benzene on your arm, in your hair, because you got clean. Who thought of it being carcinogenic? It wasn't carcinogenic, it was better than Crest. And to this day, I obviously never did any kind of evaluation of it all. How many workers at Golden are long since dead from cancer as a result of benzene? Beaucourt. Oh, what did I say? I said Golden. Oh, Golden. I'll just backtrack, okay, for one moment. I want you to know, Golden Artist Colors, Golden Artist Colors, in their first year, maybe the second year, had a visit from OSHA, right? Maybe, right, Mark? First couple of years from OSHA. They'd never come back again. That's how clean Golden Artist Colors is. You could eat off the floor of Golden Artist Colors. It's the cleanest company in every way possible. Spiritually, emotionally, cleanliness, it's like, no, but Beaucourt was a different story. So anyway, grander than all this, those little anecdotes about working there, from day one, I wouldn't know their names. You'd know their names. The relationship of Beaucourt Artist Colors, Leonard Beaucourt, Sammy Golden, with the persons who fill every art book that you've ever read. Okay, when Adams puts out an art book, they contain the names of Ted Gilliam, de Kooning, Levine, Jack Levine, Mark Rothko, Morris Lewis, Barney Newman. The most famous painters, particularly in the New York School, walked in and out of Beaucourt during those years, bartering for paint, schmoozing with Leonard. And one of the fellows who came by, who isn't necessarily as famous as the others, but a very good painter, was a man who came out of the Broadway theater. The original Fiddler on the Roof, a fellow named Zero Mostel, who was a rather chronic visitor, a good friend of Leonard, and became a good friend of the company. And I'm just telling the anecdote because he would come, this is Mr. Theater. He had just finished, well, he was in all kinds of Broadway shows, but clearly Fiddler was his biggest piece, a big heavy-set guy, beautifully groomed suit, ascot, and he'd come into the factory to visit, and he'd come up the elevator, and outside the elevator was big 50-gallon drums, and he'd take his cane, and whop it against these drums, smash it. Anybody here? Is anybody here? And everybody would run to see that Zero Mostel was visiting the factory. It was just one of these grand theatrical moments that you'd only get in a company that had that kind of intimate, hands-on, fun relationship with artists, creative artists, brilliant artists, smart artists, people who are at the forefront of the world of creativity. So one day, when I was still trying to get a job singing, I went, it was lunchtime, and I said, I'm going to go see my dad on 52nd Street, we're going to have lunch, corned beef sandwich at the local deli. And I went in, and there he was, Sam in the factory, talking to this Totsie, 5'8", flaming red hair, stunner. I wasn't vexed like he's talking to a woman, he's married to my mom. He was just like, what the hell is he talking to this good-looking woman? And she was there giving a couple of paintings that she wanted to barter, which I found out for paid. Mara McAfee was her name. She was the most popular woman in the pop art era when they were doing pop art paintings. So Mara McAfee was in that mix. And I walked over to say hello, like hello, please. My father introduced me, and she said, fortunately, "Are you free this afternoon?" free like for the rest of my life. I said, "Yes." She said, "I need a boy to pose for a series of paintings I'm doing about the deck of cards." I mean, she used the picture cards and put human beings in it. I said, "Sure." Well, that generated a lovely relationship, but once again reflecting the intimacy with a capital I. Okay, no, not that. That wasn't the whole. A lovely, lovely woman who eventually became a major illustrator, fine art painter, illustrator for National Lampoon multiple times. Well, I think. Well, it's only 8:15, Mark. Mark keeps clicking. I haven't followed anything yet. This is clearly Sam and Adele Golden's farm in New Berlin, New York. And that was the farmhouse before it became not a farmhouse, before it became the factory. Is there another one there, Mark? What's the next one, please? I haven't followed anything. What's the next one? Golden, obviously, it's the name of them. And a couple of hundred acres of land. The folks had bought it in the 70s, early on, just a summer home away from New Jersey where they had a home to be up in the country. And they went to Rockland County, it was expensive, Delaware County was expensive, Shenango County, whatever. Eventually they got to a place where they had the land, the look, the quality, and they bought it. They would go up on weekends and still in New Jersey. And they also had a home here in Florida, in Bound Brook and West Palm Beach. And then when they started Golden, they unloaded everything and obviously stayed up in New Berlin. What's the next one, Mark? Is there something else there? Well, oh yeah, Adele. You know, this sentence here. Adele said, "Sam, go out to the barn and make some paint." We're not sure if she said that like, "Get the hell out of my face," as opposed to she really was concerned about him generating a new iridescent color or something to that effect, okay? Clearly, at 66, this is unique for all of us, certainly for Mark, Barbara, myself, and our family. For a man and a woman at 66, retired, a home in West Palm Beach, Florida, a farm upstate New York, a reasonably good relationship with their children, still at that point in good health, for them to decide at the prompt of Sam that he wanted to do something. He clearly wanted to go back into the industry. He was in a buyout contract from his uncle company for 6-7 years. I think it was up at that point, right, Mark? Mark doesn't talk, okay, fine. That he wanted to do his own company and to have a partner who also is as entrepreneurial in a way as he and as creative as he, with a different set of talents. Concrete, organized, firm, exacting, not frugal, quite generous, but exacting about where the money was going to go, and says, "Okay, let's do it." Not at all, as I had taken down the definition when I started to say, well, you start things like, because you don't know what you're talking about. It's an entrepreneur from the old French, ça c'est joli, and used the first time in 1852. One who organizes, manages, and assumes risk of a business or enterprise. This is from Webster's. And willing to take risk in loss in order to make money. The last thing I know that Sam and Adele truly had in mind, I think this is the case, Mark, say yes, please, was they were going to make money. It cost them. They remortgaged their farm. They borrowed money from friends. They got money from friends. They sold a house in West Palm Beach, and they started in a 20 by 40 foot barn, Golden Artist Codes. They have no reason to believe it would go anywhere but down or middle or whatever. No reason whatsoever other than the imagination and creativity and enthusiasm of Sam Golden. I want to go back into the business and I want to make a product better than I ever had done. Perhaps some sense of jealousy as his past relationship. I'm going to make a product. And he just knew what he was talking about. Right? He knew where he was going. This wasn't catch as catch can. He knew what he could do better. And he has a partner. So, in terms of politically correct nowadays, as my brother has Barbara, my dad had Adele, who didn't say, "Come on, Sammy, like we're retired already, we're an old Jewish couple enough, let's go find a synagogue someplace and pray." Which they never did anyway. They made it happen. Now you don't know, at least I never did, And you don't either. Any couple of that age with sort of the retirement substance there, not terribly well to do, but they didn't need much, to start in a 20 by 40 foot cow barn on used equipment, what became what Mark, Barbara, and the rest of you, and your contribution is not trivial. It's not quite the same as Mark and Barbara, I hate to tell you. To start is truly unique, adventuresome, and something that has a magical quality. And I must tell you, and I will, when I was asked by Mark in 1990 would I be interested in selling Golden Artist colors overseas, I asked Suzanne, my wife was from Paris. She said, yeah, okay. I mean, she wasn't like nuts, but she knew what France. But we realized it would bankrupt the company if they hired us. But when I went during the course of the year and marketed Golden, when I would tell to persons in France, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, Spain, the story of Sam and Adele Golden, whether they understood it or not, I didn't care. I know that it had an impact that enabled us to sell the product. Oh, I forgot. Oh, this is one of Barbara's kids. That's Callan. That's Callan, the oldest of our two daughters. Emma, I don't know, is she there? No, Emma's not there. Okay, fine. And my kids aren't there. 4. No, 2. Anyway, that story for those persons, so there's Mom with Callan again. Huh?
Yes.
Whatever. And I think there's one more. Show the next one, Mark. It's the in the factory, I think. Oh no, this is Mark and Barbara at the beginning. Chuck Kelly, a young fellow who helped them at the very beginning, was really instrumental. My dad, old Tatsi, Barbara, Mark, and Adele. And I think the next one might be yeah, that one is there in the factory. They're busy looking at what a mess my dad is, whatever. And then the next one, though, I think that one I'm very proud of. I'm not so proud of, but it's really lovely. That's me. That's Emma, their daughter. Callan is in it. That's my son, Jean-Marc, the tall one. That's my daughter, Tanya, in the middle. That's our sister, Joanne Golden, who lives in Lake Worth. That's old Marky Babes and Barbara. This was, I think, at celebration for the foundation. No, there's a foundation picture, the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation, which we'd like you all to contribute before you leave this evening. I want to thank you all very much for attending to this, and hopefully you enjoyed it and got something out of it. Thank you very much. Just one more thing. No, just one more thing, Barbie, okay? When I wasn't working very much, I took a job in the city teaching 2nd grade in Spanish Harlem. At the time in the 60s, all you had to do was have a college degree. You didn't have to take a teacher. They just needed bodies. So I got a job in 110th Street in a class for emotionally disturbed 8-year-olds, like second. They came up to my knee. They weren't even so emotionally disturbed. They were like young juvenile delinquents. They were all Latin, and that wasn't the reason they were juvenile. They were juvenile delinquents because they're genetically juvenile delinquents. Anyway, when things went sour in the classroom, and I just lost some control of the classroom, this always worked. And I think it might work with you too. It went like this. When they were really noisy, I would do Salagadoo, the mishigaboo, the bibbidi bobbidi boo. Put them together and what have you got? Bibbidi bobbidi boo. Salagadoo means a mishigaboo-laroo, but the thingamabout that does the job, bibbidi bobbidi boo. So Salagadoo, the mishigaboo, bibbidi bobbidi boo. Put them together and what have you got? Bibbidi bobbidi, bibbidi bobbidi, bibbidi bobbidi boo. Boom. How was it? Okay, Chrissy?
That was great.